McCluskey, Voter Service Chair of the Radnor League of Women Voters, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Radnor Commissioners Candidates Forum this evening. Would you please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag. The League is a nonpartisan political organization, meaning we neither support nor oppose candidates. The League is dedicated to ensuring that all eligible voters have the opportunity and information to exercise their right to vote. The League encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. It's important that all parties know that the video we are doing this evening may not be used for any partisan advantage, and it must be used in its entirety if it's used. And now I'd like to introduce the candidates we have with us tonight. We have Jake Abel, who's a candidate for Ward 6, Richard Booker, who's a candidate for Ward 2, Lisa Borowski, who's a candidate for Ward 4, and John McMeekin, who's also a candidate for Ward 4. And we have two candidates that were not able to join us this evening. I'd like to thank Radnor Township, particularly the Board of Commissioners, for allowing us to host this here this evening and for videotaping it for us. The format for this evening is we'll begin with 2-minute opening statements. Then you'll be asked questions from the League. You will have 1 minute to answer those questions. And then finally, well, after we take questions from the audience, we'll have our 1-minute closing statements. We have a timer seated right in front of you, and she will keep us on track, hopefully. If she calls time, please wrap up on what your thoughts on so that we can move on. And now I'd like to start with the opening statements. We'll start with Mr. Abel.
Good evening. My name is Jake Abel, and I'm running to be the next commissioner for the 6th Ward in Radnor Township. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the event tonight and for all that they do to inform Radnor residents on important issues concerning the township and the country. Given the many challenges facing our community and the political gridlock on the Board of Commissioners, now more than ever, the decisions made on November 7th really do matter. For the residents of the 6th Ward, this would have been a great opportunity to hear both candidates talk about these important issues. Unfortunately, my opponent has decided not to participate tonight. As a resident, I would not be able to support a candidate that doesn't show up for a township forum. And as a candidate, I promise you that that's not the way I've run my campaign. Since announcing my candidacy in February, I've knocked on over 1,400 doors, listening to neighbors' concerns. And not just listening, I've taken action. Putting forth plans to improve cell service without commercializing our parks, requiring all subcommittee meetings be televised, addressing the opioid epidemic, bringing together community leaders to support at-risk students, and protecting our children from all the wires hanging from our utility poles. Over the next 4 years, the Board of Commissioners will have tough decisions regarding the Willows, stormwater management, infrastructure, and business development. We cannot have an absent commissioner. It is imperative that we elect informed candidates. I will be ready on day one to serve as commissioner. I sit here tonight because of so many dedicated and hardworking neighbors and friends who want to see real change on the board. From members at the Italian American Club to students at Villanova and Valley Forge Military College, and the neighbors who invited me into their living room, this campaign is possible because of you. Of course, my biggest supporter and toughest critic is in the audience tonight. My wife, Christy, has been nothing short of amazing, and it is great that many of you have had the opportunity to meet her and see what I get to see every day. As parents to 4 young boys, Christy and I have made an investment in Radnor Township, and when we moved here. I hope that Ward 6 residents will make an investment in their future. I ask for your support and vote on November 7th. I will not let you down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abel. Mr. Booker?
Good evening. I'm Rich Booker, currently the incumbent candidate and commissioner for Radnor's 2nd Ward. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on the event thanks to Gayla, Roberta, Susan, and the others in the league who made this possible. First, I'd like to state the obvious that the Republican candidates are here to participate tonight. We believe it's important to be here in these difficult times for Radnor Township. Currently, the 7th Ward is not represented. They have no commissioner who's actively serving their interests, and we would not allow that to happen to others by not appearing this evening to speak and have an opportunity to speak to the public. In the end, people want results, and that's what we'll deliver. And that's why we're here tonight to speak with the League of Women Voters Forum. Here are some of my results, couched as promises made, promises kept. First, since 2013, I've fought for the constituents of the 2nd Ward and the Township, and further won against overdevelopment and to minimize traffic at our neighborhoods. First, derailing the 1 million square foot MUS proposal by Biomed, and recently requiring tax payments from the developer, and then halting the massive hospital, office, hotel, PLO zoning amendment by Penn, which would have affected 7 properties in my ward. I've also fought against excessive government spending, reducing township staff, and never voting for a tax increase. Worked with the neighbors and eliminated encroachment of institutional practice facilities on VU neighborhoods, and supported funding for critical infrastructure and the Radnor Memorial Library expansion. I'll always be an advocate for the constituents and will not give up on matters that are important to the people of the 2nd Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Ms. Borowski?
Good evening. Thank you, Gayla and Roberta and the rest of the Radnor League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's forum. Thank you also to everyone who's here this evening and watching from home. I moved to Radnor Township with my family in 1976, so Radnor is my home. My parents still live in the 5th Ward. They're over there. I graduated from Radnor High School in 1984, and I'm grateful for the outstanding education I received. I attended Drexel University and graduated with a degree in communications and journalism, and currently work as the manager of development communications for Einstein Healthcare Network. My husband Mark and I returned to Radnor in 2004 and settled on Goshen Road in Radnor's 4th Ward. We moved back here so our boys, Ryan and Justin, could attend Radnor schools and benefit from the growing up in a community of supportive family, friends, and benefit from the amenities that we are so fortunate to have as a township. For 40 years, Radnor has been my home. I've served in various leadership roles within our schools and our community, and I'm most proud of my 4 years serving on the Radnor Township School Board. I entered this race because I care about the issues and about our township. Over the past 8 years, Radnor has experienced stabilization of its finances, growing security in its bond rating, and a sustained reinvestment in the amenities which make our community unique. But those positives are getting lost as negatives related to elected leadership and the personalities of those in the minority and the majority on the BOC overshadow important issues. Tonight is an opportunity to focus on the issues and discuss ways this township can collaborate to transcend party politics. I hope to demonstrate to the 4th Ward and the community how I am the best choice to help lead our board into a new era of cooperation and doing what is best for our township and our ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski. Mr. McMeekin?
Good evening, Gail. Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Good evening, Gail. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us this evening. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to air our differences or figure out what our commonalities are. My name is John McMeekin. I'm running for the 4th Ward Commissioner. I'm very proud to be hopefully the next 4th Ward Commissioner. I didn't grow up here in Radnor. I chose to be here in Radnor. I moved from Philadelphia. For those of you who know the Schuylkill River, it's a very wide river. And my wife lived on this side of the river, and she convinced me that this was the better place to live. It was a decision we made back in 1997, and we wouldn't regret a minute of it today. I've called Radnor my home ever since I moved back to the Philadelphia area. I've served for 8 years, 2 consecutive elections on the school board. I was the school board president. I served for 7 years on the DCIU, the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, where we run all the county vocational and technical education and special education programs. I have served as the board president there. I have served on the Charter Commission. I have served as a volunteer firefighter and on the Radnor Fire Company board. I have served. I have given blood, sweat, and tears for Radnor. I will give blood, sweat, and tears for the 4th Ward. I'm running to return no-nonsense government to Radnor. You're not going to hear R&D. You're not going to hear party politics from me. I demonstrated when I was on the school board that we can find consensus. We can move forward. I've criticized the current Board of Commissioners, both the minority and Democratic parties, Republican and Democratic parties, for not finding the consensus we need to move forward. I pledge that as the 4th Ward Commissioner, we will move forward, we will find consensus, we will return no-nonsense government to Radnor Township. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin. And now we're going to move into the questions from the League, and we'll start with Mr. Booker answering the first question. As a candidate for commissioner in your ward, what do you believe to be the biggest issue facing your constituents, and why is that so?
And how long do I have again? 1 minute. The biggest challenge facing the constituents in my ward is traffic. Traffic is the biggest issue that we contend with. It's the biggest deterrent to the improvement of quality of life for our residents. At the northern tip of Radnor, where the 2nd Ward is, we have a great influx of commuters and others that are going south through the township, and it is impacting the streets and the traffic within our neighborhoods and our area in general. So controlling the traffic, controlling the trucks, maintaining the privacy of the neighborhoods is a key concern for my folks.
Thank you. Ms. Borowski?
Well, I've spent the summer and the fall knocking on almost 1,000 doors in the 4th Ward. And I've spent that time talking to constituents, and it's my understanding that the things that people are concerned about are certainly the conflicts, I think, that are occurring on the Board of Commissioners. And people want to know about how we're going to continue to preserve our open spaces and what we are going to do with our stormwater fee. I think those are some of the issues that people are interested in knowing more about and understanding what the plans are for the future. We need to, as a board, I believe, address things and how we're going to move forward as a township, looking at how we're spending our stormwater dollars. We have about $3 million in that fund right now, and people are interested in knowing how that's going to be spent. People want to know about the trails. People want to know and see action on some of the issues that have been moving forward through the commissioners of the board over the past 2 years. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McMeekin?
Thank you. Well, I think I'd start out by saying that in the 4th Ward, we're very lucky. We don't have a number of tremendous problems. We enjoy a community that in large part gets along. I think what we do see in the 4th Ward is the angst about how the Board of Commissioners is actually handling the entire township. And I think what people want is to get past all of the drama. And there's all kinds of different drama. But in general, people are saying we're sick of it. This is no different than Washington. This is a quagmire of lack of leadership. So I think I bring to the 4th Ward the experience to hit the ground running. I've done it before. You will not see the drama. You will be relieved of the angst if I'm the 4th Ward Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Abel?
Thank you, Gayla. The 6th Ward it benefits because it has the most parks out of any ward in the township. And the biggest park in the township, which happens to be in the 6th Ward, is the Willows. And as I go door to door and talk to residents, they have a lot of questions on the Willows. So I would, as commissioner, that would be one of my top priorities. And the Willows just isn't about the mansion. The mansion's a big part of the Willows, and I've supported the plan put forward by the Willows Park Preserve. I have some issues with the plan dealing with the cost and some other issues that we can hopefully address later tonight. But the Willows also talks about this. The Willows also encompasses the surrounding neighborhoods, and there's poor cell service in those neighborhoods. And I've worked for the last 8 months to put together a plan that addresses the cell service without commercializing our parks, meaning we're not going to put a cell tower at the Willows. I've been down to Delaware County Emergency Services, and I've met with the officials, and we've looked at ways to address the safety concerns without putting a cell tower, and that's putting up an antenna. You don't need to commingle the two. So as commissioner, I would work addressing the Willow situation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the second question. We'll start with Ms. Borowski. We'll just broaden out that first question a little bit and ask you, what do you believe to be the largest challenge that the township is facing, and why do you think this is the case?
Well, I certainly think it's no secret that the largest township I think we face right now as a township with regards to our leadership is the issues with our commissioners. That what happens on the board is creating, I believe, the inability for us to move forward. The arguing, the party politics, the constant trying to decide who is behaving worse than the other is not moving our township forward. There are issues that need to be addressed. We have a sewer plan that is in front of the board that our engineers have worked hard on. We need to look at that and we need to address it. We have needs around we have needs that we need to look at around the traffic. We need to look at areas where we can have new investment so that we can continue to move our community forward and get additional revenue so that we can pay for the things that we want to do here as a community and the things that we want to do for the future.
Thank you. Mr. McMeekin?
I think one of the biggest challenges we face in Radnor is what I'll call the shiny penny syndrome. And the shiny penny syndrome is when you focus on something that's a want, not a need, and you lack strategic vision for where you're investing your time and dollars. I think we have been culpable, everyone here in Radnor, for reacting to things that look neat on the first view, or that are an issue that is an issue of the day, not of the year, or not of the generation. So we've done that to the detriment of planning for our stormwaters. I'll give you one example. If the Radnor Fire Company was called to your house right now, we have the street in front of it is sinking. Our outriggers on our engines will scrape on the ground. One day that engine won't be able to get out. That's a shiny penny syndrome. We haven't invested the time and the money into fixing our streets to make sure that we don't have problems like that. So I think what we need is strategic planning, long-term vision, and the experience of leadership to guide the board to make the right decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Abel?
Thank you. The biggest challenge I see before the township is bipartisanship. Anyone who's watched the last couple of meetings of the board has seen most resolutions, most pieces of legislation fail in a 3-3 tie. And with the commissioner from the 7th Ward absent and if unwilling to step down, we could have 6 commissioners up here well into 2018. We need commissioners that are willing to work in a bipartisan manner. And as Mr. McMeekin discussed earlier, I have my background, my experience, and I've demonstrated the ability to work in a bipartisan manner. When I was foreign policy assistant to the Speaker of the House, I worked with Republican and Democrats alike to push forward foreign policy that was good for our country and kept our country safe. When I went over to Defense Intelligence, I worked with all members of the community, where those that agreed with my position and those that didn't agree with my position. So I've got a history and experience working together in a bipartisan manner to get things done for the better, and I'll do that for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Booker?
Our biggest problem right now is we have the member of the board that is not currently serving, who's been indicted and needs to be replaced. So that's number one. We'll need to resolve that, get a new person for the 7th Ward, and move forward with a 7-person board. The next issue is probably our stormwater program. I call it the stormwater tax. It's really tax dollars that's being used as a fee. But the stormwater fee is, we have closer to $4 million that currently we have been unable to spend. We do study after study and are unable to come together as a board to determine where we're going to get the most bang for the buck and how we're going to spend those dollars. So that's a big issue. The next issue would be our sanitary sewer system, which currently is very near capacity and currently has a lot of problems with infiltration. And so it's going to need massive amounts of money in the future to upgrade that 50 to 100-year-old system. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question I'll address first to Mr. McMeekin. Development is a mixed blessing in Radnor. Please give us several reasons why it's a good idea and several reasons why you have reservations about it. And what do you see your role as a commissioner in working with zoning and planning commissions?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, that's one that hit home to my wife and family and I. We moved off of King of Prussia Road in large part because of the great work of Mr. Booker in getting out the word to the public about how the development, both in Radnor and on the way into King of Prussia, was affecting and would affect our traffic. I think we've talked already this evening about traffic being an impediment to the quality of life in Radnor. If we're going to have development, we have to plan for the development, whether it's planning for kids in the schools, or planning for the capacity of roads, or planning for the capacity of sewer systems and stormwater. All of those have to go into land use development. If you go to any community that hasn't had proper planning, you'll see urban sprawl. I'm very proud that we don't have urban sprawl here in Radnor. I'm also very proud that we haven't let our building codes go completely haywire and allow developers to build out of the capacity of Radnor.
Thank you. Mr. Abel?
Thank you. I grew up in a small town in the western suburbs of Chicago, not unsimilar to Radnor Township. Well, it was much smaller at the time. It was about 5,000 people. We go back now, and it's 15,000 people. And similar to Radnor Township, we don't have we have the same infrastructure. We have two-lane roads throughout my hometown in Illinois, just as we do here. And so when you talk about growing and development, you've got to really, as Mr. McMeekin said, you've got to plan and plan accordingly. So while it sounds good to develop the township, and that brings in revenue to the township in a form of the business tax, we've got to be careful on how much and how fast we build, and so that we don't cause traffic problems and other issues that are unforeseen. So I'd go back to what Mr. McMeekin said and just say that we need to plan accordingly and take every development project on a one-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Booker?
Development in the township is really reaching a crescendo, and it's at a tipping point. Currently, every development that comes before the board requires some sort of variance or waiver. That is the problem that we have with our current development in Radnor. We have a comprehensive plan. We need to maintain the comprehensive plan. We need to develop in the business areas of Garrett Hill and Wayne. What we should not be doing is developing other areas and providing waivers and variances and other rights to developers to build more than what they otherwise would be able to. In addition, our stormwater ordinance really provides for us to have so we can put the brakes on development. Where they don't meet the stormwater requirements, we could limit development. And I think we really need to take a close look at the development and really assess where we're going to go from here, including sanitary sewer and stormwater impacts.
Thank you. Ms. Borowski?
Well, let's be honest, we need business development here in the township in order to help offset the taxes that everyone pays. So, but I do agree with my colleagues up here that smart business development is appropriate. We are working on a comprehensive plan, or in the beginnings of working on a comprehensive plan with our surrounding townships, which I think is important, because not only do what we do affect other people, what other people do affects us. And I think that as a township, making sure that we are looking beyond our walls. As someone who lives over on Goshen Road, who is now kind of suffering through the increased traffic from the Lissitor development in Marple and the construction of different schools and other properties, I think it behooves us to continue to look outside our walls as we are looking to develop within our walls. I think that there are certain areas we need to look at in Ward 4 as well when we look at some of the institutionalized zoning that's happening there. So I think we need to put forth a plan to help address those issues if it eventually comes about. Thanks.
Thank you. And this question will be first addressed by Mr. Abel. We've all heard the adage that you divide and conquer. We also know that it is important to unify to govern. Do you believe your election will do more to divide or unify the Board of Commissioners, and on what basis do you base that case?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, when I worked for the federal government, I have demonstrated time and time again the ability to work in a bipartisan manner. So I think if I'm elected commissioner, I will work well with all my other colleagues, regardless of party, to make sure we're doing what's right for the community. When I go door to door, and oftentimes I'm asked, are you Republican or Democrat? I'll respond, I have an R at the end of my name, but it's not for Republican, it's for Radnor. And if we're putting forward good policies, it shouldn't matter what the party affiliation is. It should matter that it's good for the people, and that's what I'll work for every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker.
Well, I think if I'm elected, I'll definitely contribute more to the unification of the board. But my view is that civility, and I want to talk briefly about civility, civility does not require that everyone agree all the time. Civility does not mean 7-0 votes. We can disagree without being disagreeable, but that's not happening lately. When commissioners and staff are rude or disrespectful to constituents, when they call out for bodily harm to be done to speakers with whom they disagree, when they attempt to intimidate taxpayers or other commissioners, that's a lack of civility, and that's been the state of affairs lately. We need to change that. We need to come together for the good of the township under new leadership, and that's what I'll provide.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski.
Well, I spent 4 years working with the school board, and during that time, we had some particularly, contentious things come before us. And I felt like I did always try to work with my board colleagues and set an example around how we can function as a board to get things done for what is good for the community and for the schools. As I would look to be elected as a board commissioner, I do not consider myself as a representative of a Republican or a Democrat. I consider myself a representative of the community, of the people who have elected me, of the people who have needs and concerns that need to be met. And those are not party concerns. Those are concerns of the entire township. And we are also not one ward. We are a township. So what happens in Ward 4 impacts Ward 2. What happens and my decisions as a commissioner will impact all the wards. So I believe as a commissioner, I need to, I understand that and would work collaboratively with my fellow colleagues on the board.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin.
Well, I think the easiest answer to the question is that I have a demonstrated track record of working with people, not with parties. I would listen, learn, follow, and then lead. And you can look back at my 8 years in the school board, being elected twice, multiple years as board president, my 7 years on the DCIU, multiple years as board president. In each of those capacities, I work with people, whether they are people throughout Delaware County or people within Radnor. As an officer of the American Bar Association, I represent lawyers all over the country. We don't represent lawyers based on their partisan beliefs. We have very widely divergent points of view. But for all of those, we lead the organization going forward and planning for the future. So as the 4th Ward Commissioner, I would be a voice for the people and not for a particular party. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next question will be first addressed by Mr. Booker. Radnor residents value open space and historic places. What would you do to advocate special protections for our parks, open space, and historic properties as part of the comprehensive plan that is currently being drafted in collaboration with Haverford Township?
First of all, we have over 744 acres of open space in the township, most recently having a bond issue for about 70 acres that were purchased for the Ardrossan, from Ardrossan from Eddie Scott. So we have a great deal of park space, open space, and what we need to focus on is what do we do with these multiple historic buildings that we have in the township, and so that's our biggest challenge right now. as far as my goals to further that, we really need to focus on enhancing and providing a steady income stream to maintain all of that open space that we have.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski.
Well, my view on open space and the historical buildings here in our township are, once they're gone forever. So I believe that we've done an excellent job in the past working to maintain and preserve our open space. Those acres that we have saved, and that we have done so by putting forth a smart plan for in order to finance that, are things that we need to continue to look at and things that we need to continue to maintain. The Willows Mansion, which I think is the biggest historical building that we're probably talking about, it is incredible to me that a community group has come forth with $1 million to help preserve that property. I work in fundraising. That is a very difficult thing to do. I think the collaboration from the community and the people who are looking to save that mansion should be supported. And I think that, again, once that building is lost, or once these historical properties and open space are lost, they are gone forever.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin.
I live in a house that was built in 1920. That's the newest house I've ever lived in. I believe firmly in preserving our history. And I do think, and I agree with Ms. Borowski, that preserving our history means we don't lose it. And it's important to have that connection to who Radnor is today to what we were before. But I think in doing so, we have to be very careful of balancing our needs versus our wants. So the Willows Mansion, should it be saved? Absolutely. Do we have to come up with a creative solution to make it work? Absolutely. It's not a very easy answer, and certainly public-private financing partnerships are a great way to start. But if we have people who are committed to meeting that halfway point, we have to hold them accountable for meeting the halfway point. So we have to raise the money so that we're not raising taxes in order to make our needs and our wants meet each other. I also think we have to be very careful about preserving open space that's simply pocket parks. We've had a history of small little parks in Radnor that aren't contiguous with each other to give us the open space we need.
Thank you, Mr. Abel.
Thank you. Like the fellow candidates up here, I believe we need to do everything we can to protect our open space and historical buildings. But we need to have a vision for that open space. You know, not just collecting random tracts of land. We need to look to find those parts that we can have contiguous open space where they're connected in some way. And then we also need to look for other opportunities. It's not just a view shed, but look for ways that it can improve lifestyle with the trail system. It can increase property value, and it can be of greater utility to the township. And if elected the 6th Ward Commissioner, I will represent the Willows, and I will be deeply involved in the vision for the Willows going forward. And I will work day and night with the Willows Park Preserve to make sure that we have the right plan put forward that's right for the community and that's right for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll address this first to Ms. Borowski. The commissioners passed a resolution several months ago to encourage nonpartisan redistricting in PA to help eliminate gerrymandering. Do you think Radnor should adopt a nonpartisan approach to drawing ward boundaries? Why or why not?
Well, I absolutely think we should have a nonpartisan approach to drawing ward boundaries. I have to say that, I know that they worked very hard on this. I think it was in 2013 when they redrew or maybe 2014 when they redrew the boundaries. It is strange to me that there are neighborhoods where you can have an entire street of people who are voting in one ward and then maybe 4 or 5 or 6 houses that are voting in another. So I believe that as a township, we probably need to look at that. I think we need to understand the impact of the way the wards are drawn and the way that it kind of can divide neighborhoods. So if I was on the board and I had the opportunity to work on that, I would like to see a little more perhaps consideration given to the fact that streets need to be kept together. People need to be need to be aligned, and we need to make sure that what's good for an entire street is something that everybody can get together and collaborate and get behind.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin.
So in giving some consideration of that, I think one of the things we should look at is the actual research that's out there on gerrymandering. And for those of you in the audience who don't know, Jack Johannes, who's a political professor of political science at Villanova, he wrote a wonderful book on gerrymandering and how districts are drawn. What I think we have to think about for the local level is that there was an independent commission. Those suggestions and recommendations were made to the Board of Commissioners, and they rejected them. And they decided to draw the boundaries the way they drew them. Now, does that split up districts? Maybe it does. But when you look at the actual data, there is no great data on the local level for gerrymandering. So I think when we look at the districts, I think we look at what makes sense. You know, one should be a little bit larger, one should be a little bit smaller, but it should be a community effort, and I think it should be a nonpartisan effort.
Thank you, Mr. Abel.
The issue of gerrymandering is concerning, and in my opinion, it's going to be a question that's ultimately addressed by the Supreme Court. The bottom line is that politicians should not be choosing their voters. Voters should be choosing their politicians. And we don't have to look much farther on a gerrymandered ward than the 6th Ward, where I've got neighbors on West Wayne. One votes at the middle school, the other side of the street votes at the Township building. So when I go door to door, I've told these neighbors that I will make every effort, if elected commissioner, to make sure that they are able to vote in a polling site in their ward and where they can walk. I mean, the ultimate goal on Election Day is that we get the most people at the polling booth. And right now, people are staying home because their polling sites have been moved farther away from their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker.
Well, it's funny you should ask this because the current districting for our township was put together by Commissioner Nagel and Commissioner Spengler. He's taking my time. Like, can we reset here? Commissioners Nagel and Spengler put together our current ward boundaries, and there was very little input. But what we did do, though, initially, was there was an expert, statewide expert, hired to give us our boundaries after, I think, 20 years. So it's supposed to be done every 5 years with the census. But we had it done 2013, as Lisa alluded to. The woman who put together the initial draft of the boundaries had removed 3 or 4 of the commissioners from their own wards. So there are certain practical aspects that need to be addressed. And if anything, right now we have certain districts that have been the determination from the Democrat majority in the township.
All right. I'll ask this one. Sorry, we're sorting the questions over here, so just give me a minute. And this one will first be addressed to Mr. McMeekin. What can you do to change the perception that Radnor is no longer business friendly?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, as we look at our strategic plans for where to develop, whether it's developing in the buildings that are currently vacant in Garrett Hill, or developing a better mix of retail in the heart of Wayne. I think that's a strategic planning issue. I think we look at what the taxes are, and as we look in Wayne, we don't have many vacant storefronts, which is wonderful, but we don't have a mix that's drawing people, kind of on a 12-hour day. I think if we prioritize developing retail so that we have a continuum of the day, we'll generate more tax revenue, which will help the township in general.
Thank you, Mr. Abel.
I think that perception has a lot to do with the way they're received at the Board of Commissioner level. A lot of times these plans come forward and they spend years up here and nothing's ever moved forward. So as commissioner, I would like to work with all the businesses that come forward and looking to set up shop in Radnor Township and speed along the plans. You know, a lot of these projects just stall, and a lot has to do with the makeup of the board, and right now with one member absent, having that six-member makeup, there's often going to be a 3-3 split. So we just need to, as a board, look at opportunities and find good plans and push them forward quicker than they're being done right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Booker?
The premise of the question is actually misplaced. It refers to some kind of a development issue. Some people in the township say that we're not friendly to developers, therefore we're not friendly to business. That's absolutely incorrect. The developers oftentimes do very little business in the township after they've developed a property. The biggest issue for being business friendly is to eliminate and to stop using aggressive auditing of our business privilege and mercantile taxes. So every business in Radnor has to pay a gross receipts tax, 3 mils. So it's $3 per thousand of every thousand that they make, whether they make money or not. And we are aggressively auditing all of our businesses with an incentivized contingent fee auditor. That causes the most stress, and it causes the most difficulty for our businesses and contributes the most to our business unfriendly reputation.
Thank you. Ms. Borowski?
Well, our business properties here in Radnor are probably some of the most valuable on the main line. And businesses are going to come forward to us with plans and what they're going to do. And we as a community need to do a better job of understanding from the different wards where these plans are coming forth what the community is willing to tolerate, what the community is willing to be a part of, and then work with those businesses to understand those needs and try to balance those. I believe that we need to the commissioners need to do a better job communicating with their wards and their residents and understanding their needs, and then be able to take that back to the businesses and develop plans that we are reasonably sure that will move forward. Business development here in the town is going to happen. There are properties that are going to be developed, and we need to make sure that we are putting forth plans that we all can agree with and we all can live with.
Thank you. I'll address this first to Mr. Abel. What would you do or suggest to improve the efficiency of board meetings and increase participation and input of the public?
Well, I attended the League of Women Voters Forum on Civility in Government a few months back, and one of the panelists there, who I believe was the president of the board at the time, mentioned that when he ran the board, they didn't limit public speakers to 5 minutes, and that allowed people to come up, say what they needed to say, and it seemed to move those meetings along. So that's one thing I would do. I would remove that 5-minute limit and let residents air their views and concerns as they see fit. The other thing I would ask is that all commissioners remain seated. You know, we're elected officials, or they're elected officials, and you know, whether it's a concern or a comment in support, they should listen and respect the person coming up to speak. So when you have commissioners walking off the dais, and that just angers the citizens even more and continues that dialogue. So if we want to speed the meetings along, we've got to look at ways that we can work well with the residents and have a better rapport.
Thank you. Mr. Booker?
Well, there's not a lot more that we can do to limit our meetings. We already limit them till 11 o'clock, we end. And the biggest issue that we have is what Commissioner Curley said to me the other day was we stuff 100 hours of meeting into 220 hours of meeting time. So we are our own worst enemy in lengthening the amount of time that we take for various issues. Some additional efficiencies would be helpful, and less focus on political, already developed solutions and justifying them, and more work on developing the best solution to an issue. And that way, we will shorten our meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski.
So I think I've said this before at the commissioners' meetings that I've attended. I agree, Mr. Booker, that too much business is trying to be done at the Board of Commissioners meetings. People want to speak. People want to be heard. And I believe that the Board of Commissioners would benefit greatly from going to a committee meeting system where there are other meetings where business is actually getting done, where residents have the opportunity to come and interact with the board, similar to the way it's done on the school board. I participated in that. I felt that was a very effective way. And then what is happening at the Board of Commissioners meetings are the big decisions are getting made. And that is where the board then has the opportunity to hear from fellow board members, understand the positions of the different board members, and make an informed decision and make a vote. I really think that one of the biggest problems with our current Board of Commissioners is that there is not enough time for the residents to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin.
3 words: transparency, respect, and planning. If we were more transparent, people would know what's going on. You wouldn't have all the questions that are essentially boiled down to what's going on. Tell me what's going on. Respect. When a person comes up to the dais or comes up to the podium to speak, give them the respect they're due for showing up there that night. Whatever they came with was important. But the respect is a two-way street. So limiting the public comment versus opening the public comment up. We will have more efficient meetings if we respect each other and have a prescribed amount of time for public comment. Planning. Make informed decisions. By the time you get here, be prepared to listen. Don't talk at people, listen to people, make your decisions, move on. If you make a mistake, fix it. Those are what's going to return us.
Thank you very much. And the next question looks like it's our final question of the evening. Will first be answered by Mr. Booker. Climate change is impacting many communities. How do you see it making a difference in Radnor, and what steps will you promote to help Radnor adapt and make a difference?
Can you repeat the question? I missed the first part of it.
Sure. Climate change is impacting many communities. How do you see it making a difference in Radnor, and what steps will you promote to help Radnor adapt and make a difference?
Well, I think the environmental issues that affect Radnor the most really relate to much more generic and much more tangible issues for our residents. We have issues with trees, and we have a program that is being vaunted now as necessary to cut down all ash trees because of the emerald ash borer. So that's an environmental issue that we're facing. Also, once again, our stormwater program and our stormwater ordinance is really designed to keep the stormwater problems from getting any worse based on a 2005 or so baseline. And we're struggling right now with, how do we want to change that to improve? Do we want to go back to waters and streams that are back in 1880 and that kind of a clean waters, and how much would that cost? So those are the issues that face this township.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski.
Stormwater and the issues surrounding that certainly is one of the biggest issues, I think, being impacted by the climate change. You know, we see here now the 100-year storms becoming 50-year storms, becoming 20-year storms. I've stood on the steps of the administration building for the school district and watched as a cloudburst rose the water there at that intersection to the point where I had to take my shoes off, roll my pants up, and run to my car to move it out of the way so it wouldn't flood out. So I believe that we need to put together in a comprehensive stormwater plan. We need to listen to the people that we've put on the stormwater committee and who bring forth plans that are summarily rejected by the board. I think that we need to do a better job of making sure that we are addressing these issues, that the stormwater that we can get our arms around the problem. We've put money into that plan, and we need to make sure that we are investing that in plans that are impactful for every ward in this township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMeekin.
In 2008, the Pennsylvania legislature passed passed Act 70, and they just updated it, for those of you who haven't read it, in August of 2016. And they laid out 13 different issues and ways to reduce the effects of climate change. Unfortunately, here in Radnor, many of them don't really apply. We do have a number of cows. That's one of the larger contributors to greenhouse gases, but that's not going to solve it here. What we're dealing with here really is the effect of climate change. And Ms. Borowski is exactly correct. We have to move water from one place to another, and we have to plan for it. We have to move it effectively. Right now, we have properties that are flooding out. We don't have 100-year storms. We have year-long storms. I woke up this morning and I had 2 inches of rain in my Jeep. That was unpleasant to get in for the car ride this morning. We need to plan for moving water, and that's a comprehensive plan for stormwater management.
Thank you, Mr. Abel.
Well, Mr. Meekin, let me suggest putting the cover on the Jeep at night.
That was one of the solutions my wife proposed.
Well,
Give him a full minute.
Well, I've got two, and I'll keep this quick. I've got two solutions where we can address climate change, and I think we can all agree that the lifestyle we live has an impact on the environment. One, we have a lot of concerned citizens in this township. We hear them talk at every board meeting, and I've had side comments on climate change. So what I would do is I would set up a commission of community volunteers to talk about these issues and come up with ideas on ways we can address climate change. And the second thing I would take those suggestions, and I would work with CARFAC to see which of those suggestions are beneficial, because these types of changes are going to have a cost associated with it, and we need to see what the cost value is, and that's the way I would move forward. I would set up a commission and work with CARFAC and find ways that we can address climate change here in Radnor Township.
Thank you very much. And to give you all just a few minutes to prepare for your closing statements, I want to remind everybody to vote on November the 7th and inform yourself before you do. There is a ballot question this year involving taxes, so everybody should be interested in that. You can go to the league website for information, and there's also information there on the judges so that you can make informed decisions on who you vote for judges. And so now we'll go into closing statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Borowski.
Thank you again, Gayla and Roberta, and to Megan. Thank you to the League. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be here this evening. If the campaign is a job interview, I've done everything I can to impress upon the residents of 4th Ward how I would perform as their commissioner. I've knocked on the doors of over 1,000 neighbors. I've attended every commissioner meeting since announcing my candidacy in March. I've sought perspective from 4th Ward residents on the issues, and I've spoken about those of most importance. Radnor is fortunate to have engaged and involved residents, and I encourage and support their efforts. It would be my hope to engage others who can bring a similar wealth of knowledge and expertise. It is time to move our township forward and get past the petty bickering which has taken over the BOC. I'm committed to moving forward with a focus on transparency, communications, and civil governance, while promoting with the members of the board to encourage smart business development, infrastructure improvements, and move forward a smart stormwater program, all while protecting our tax dollars, our open space, our parks, and our trails. I would consider it an honor and a privilege to serve the residents of the 4th Ward. I may not have all the answers now, I certainly don't, but I hope to have the opportunity to work with them to preserve the quality of life we enjoy in Radnor now and for future generations. Thank you for your consideration, and I hope you can think of me when you head to the polls on November 7th, and definitely vote no on the property tax reform or referendum. Thanks.
Mr. McMeekin.
Gail and members of the League of Women Voters, thank you very much. This was a wonderful opportunity. I think as you look at the candidates before you and you think, how are we going to be different? One of the things you can judge us both on, or all of us on, quite frankly, is our past experience. I bring experience in leadership. I bring experience based on my performance for pragmatic, open, transparent government. You will not have the drama. You will not have the bickering. I will work towards compromise as many places as possible. We enjoy a wonderful life here in Radnor, and we can't allow the national politics and the bickering to infect this board. We need to cure that now. I will represent the 4th Ward, and you will be proud of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abel.
I too want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the event tonight, and Gayla for moderating. And Megan, I'm sorry I ignored the stop sign a couple times. I may do it again before I'm done. But now I want to spend a few minutes and talk directly to the residents of the 6th Ward. Christy and I want to thank each of you for the respect and kindness shown to our family. This has been an incredible experience, and it's all because of you. The election on November 7th is about which candidate is ready to lead Radnor Township over the next 4 years. I've demonstrated during this campaign that I'm ready to step in and make tough decisions on day one. From protecting our parks from commercialization, to televising all public meetings, to bringing together community leaders to support our children, I have shown the ability to form a plan and bring people together for the common good. The 6th Ward has benefited from strong leadership over the last 20 years. I'm grateful to have received the endorsement from current Commissioner Don Curley and the 2 previous commissioners, Jim Pierce and Tom Masterson. I now ask you for your support on November 7th, because together we can achieve more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker.
Thanks very much to the League, Gayla, Roberta, Susan, and others, and for this forum. In closing, I'd like to say that growing up in this area and residing in Radnor for the last 18 years has been my privilege. As Commissioner, the protection of our neighborhoods and community has and always will be my top priority. As my constituents know, I'm always there to fight for them. I'm always willing to make their voices heard in the Township building, at the board meetings, and in our local government. My neighbors know that I'll fight for them, not for the bureaucrats, not for the developers, not for the municipal employee unions. I fight for the rights of the taxpayers and the other constituencies of Radnor, for every neighbor and every neighborhood. I'm honored to serve as Commissioner of Radnor Township and look forward to another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of the candidates that joined us this evening and your insightful answers. I encourage everybody again to vote November the 7th, and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for coming out tonight.